Well, here we are. Oh, hear that. There's a voice.
That's
Did you hear
you.
that, Pat? Did you hear that
That's
noise saying
you.
this is being recorded? No, it's just
That's
a
you.
mechanical voice or an
Yeah,
automatic woman. I have not got a woman in the room with me here. I want to use
yeah, yeah.
perfectly clear. Okay, so how are you today, Pat? Good weather
I'm
up
grand,
there?
Jude. The sun's come out again. It's been very overcast everywhere, but
Hmm.
it's been a fine day. I was
It's
in the
very warm
occupied
here.
territory this morning. It was very warm.
It is really warm, almost breathless. I found earlier in the day, but then I went for a walk and the wind's picking up a bit, so it's
Yeah,
rather fresher. Anyway, that's all personal stuff and meteorological stuff, and we don't want to be talking about that. We want to be talking about hardcore politics. And
hardcore
you don't
politics.
get hardcore politics much harder and corer than Edwin Poots, who
Yes.
no, he wasn't the boogie's favorite.
Yeah.
Everybody, I for one, hold my
Yeah.
hand up and say I thought he wasn't going to win. What did you say
Uh,
last week?
no, I thought once Sir Geoffrey, and
I think everybody thought Sir Jeff.
I thought Sir Geoffrey was a certain almost after he came in, and all the media guys, and I think even Dublin was sort of half hoping it would be Sir Geoffrey.
Hmm.
But I haven't said, hey, Jude, 1917 is hardly a ringing endorsement, it's not a landslide. So I'd say Edmund, somebody said the last day, the external problems haven't changed and the internal ones haven't changed. So he's got a
Well,
very divided party, he's got a very divided country, and the protocol is still there. And even if he says his priority is getting rid of the protocol, and even if they got rid of the protocol, what are they going to replace it with? So it'll be interesting to see where we go.
I think the fact that he won 19, I know a win's a win and 50% plus one, but it does
Yeah.
show how divided the party is. You can see, I
Mm.
mean, somebody who's following Sir Geoffrey, you can't imagine that same person following Poots. They're just
Yeah.
chalk and cheese, really. And I know
Yeah.
you could tell that Geoffrey was very disappointed when he conceded his defeat and said he
Yeah.
would work on all the rest of it. But
Yeah.
I don't think, frankly, I wouldn't guarantee that Edwin will be leader for many years. I don't really don't think
Well,
so.
I don't know, but Jude, I think he said that they're basically, and I don't know how this works, that they're going to refer to or revert to core principles. Well, core principles might have worked in 1974 or 5 when the DUP was formed, but the world's moved on. Secondly, now, I don't know if there's such a thing as a liberal wing in the DUP, but there are people in the DUP who certainly don't want to go back to sort of promulgating creationism and
Yeah.
against same-sex marriage and against abortion and contraception and any other social issue that they consider liberal. So you've got all that sort of problem. And hey, I've never bought the Daily Mail in my life, but apparently I have a friend who sent me on the page 2 of the Daily Mail, the mainland edition on Saturday, and said creationists take over the DUP. So
Yeah.
there's a whole issue. Now the other thing as well, Charlie Poots was Edwin's father, who had some strange ideas about Catholics. Paul Given, apparently they're going to put in as first minister. This is a guy who pulled a LIFA 50,000 grant and then awarded 300,000 to a marching band competition, I think the same day. And that apparently was the final straw for Martin McGuinness. So how he's going to work and dovetail with Sinn Féin down the road. And of course, then the final thing, if they insist on pulling down the protocol and not work north-south meetings, then Sinn Féin have to make a decision. And I'm repeating this, I said it the last time. If Stormont's pulled down this time, I ain't going back
Ain't
up.
going up. I agree with you. There's also a famous photograph, incidentally, of Paul Given putting a tipper or whatever to light a
Yeah, I've read that. I haven't seen
and he's
it.
turning,
Yeah.
smiling at the cameras. So, those kind of images stay with people, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's a big mistake. They made a big mistake, really, because Poots is on the right of the DUP. The place that the problem is occurring is on the other side, on the left, because they're losing far, far more people to Alliance than they are to the TUV.
Jim Allister. Yeah.
And if they keep on doing that, that's going to be it seems to be a
Yeah.
death wish. However, maybe short term, you see, they're not concentrating on the border poll as maybe you or I would say. They're going to keep leaking people to the Alliance Party, and the time will come whenever next year, maybe, when Sinn Féin will be the biggest party, and then you'll have a border poll, and the thing, rolls forward and in favor of Republicans. Maybe he's not thinking that way. Maybe he's thinking of the protocol. because that's the immediate thing that seems to be on their minds terribly. And maybe he's getting a wee bit of backing on this, because Lord Frost, I heard today, quoted as saying that the protocol was dead in the water.
Yeah.
Although he didn't say anything about what he was going to do about that.
No.
And besides, of course, it's something that the UK signed up to.
Yeah.
Are they going to, is the UK likely to walk away from it the same way that Trump walked away from the Paris Climate Agreement, do you think?
But hold on, Jude. This is much more, sorry, very different. This is a sort of a bilateral agreement between two states in regard to a specific place, not some sort of worldwide global crisis. This is a specific agreement about a specific subject.
Well, maybe they'll ease it. Maybe they'll find a way of making things a bit smoother.
I don't see how. But hold on, Jude. If they walk away unilaterally, then there's no deal.
But then maybe they see that danger and they won't do that. But the Frost and Puts and so on will have some kind of pressure that they put on, maybe the threat in the background of violence in the north, and everybody wants to avoid that. So it might be that they would have some form of words, or they would change a few things to make movement of goods from Britain to the north.
No, but hold on. Puts says it's not tweaking it, or it has to be gone. He said that. So,
well, I think you'll find that he'll roll back a wee bit from that. I think what they'll get. I'm just guessing. I mean, who am I to predict the future? Didn't I say that Jeffrey was going to be the man who's going to win it?
Yeah.
But, I'm guessing that they'll find some way, the EU will go along with it, of smoothing the trade between Britain and the North, and that'll keep people on board.
They certainly can tweak it, and it's obviously not working the way it should do. And all these agreements are one thing, but getting it to work on the ground, like who envisaged problems about clay on flowers coming into Northern Ireland, or plants coming into Northern?
It just seems sort of ludicrous. I mean, I live in the North, and maybe I'm a privileged person. I haven't noticed, apart from the fact that I had a bit of bother getting John Lewis stuff in the post. Other than that, my life goes on as normal. The shops are just as full as they were before.
One thing I said this morning, you see some of the COVID restrictions here have eased up today, and another batch of them. And I heard a guy on RT this morning talking to various people, would you be going north of the border? And the observation was made to me by one person that said, hey, no, I'm not going across the border that much anymore, because the prices have definitely gone up in the north. So I know the only thing I think anybody still will go across the border for is probably booze.
Well, maybe you're right. Yeah. I mean, I remember the time when I used to go across the border to get my petrol anytime I was in Derry. So these things sort of come and go. It might be that at this stage, things are dearer in the north than they were. I actually think that here's my prediction. It may be wrong, of course, that Edwin will be given some sort of fig leaf that'll suggest that he has, he was the man who came in and got a change. It actually won't be anything substantial at all, but it'll apparently ease trade between Britain and the north. Secondly, that's short term. Thinking about the protocol, in my opinion. The long term, or the medium term, actually, is the question of a border poll. And I think that the election of Edwin is a very dangerous thing, medium term, long term, because in a year's time, would you say that more people will vote for alliance? Or let me rephrase that. Do you think that in a year's time, Edwin's election will help Sinn Féin in their votes, or hinder Sinn Féin in their votes and becoming the biggest party?
Most definitely help. I just like right up there with Arlene Foster's "When You Feed a Crocodile." The insulting sort of pejorative sort of language like that, as if people here are sort of animals, the nationalist community. See, when Edwin sort of said, like his father, by the way, you should never judge any man what his father said, but there's a quote within seconds of Edwin becoming the new leader of the DUP. Like I received it, and I can see it circulating widely on social media. But the father's comment about Catholics, I would cut off electricity. I said he'd cut off electricity and water to the Catholic community, and he would cut social security, and there would be no trouble in this country if he was in charge.
Oh, that's right. I saw that.
I saw that.
I just
You
sort of
know,
laughed at it.
but but there's a mentality there, and there's a sort of that's the sort of Jim Alistair viewpoint that unless you totally accept the unionist position, you have no rights. You know.
Well, do you think they have inflicted a mortal wound on themselves by electing Edwin? I think they
Yeah,
have,
well,
actually.
I don't know about that. You see, here's the point, here's just, and I'm not certain of it. Everyone says, hey, he is not what everybody thinks he is. Now, I have no evidence of it, but there are two things. Apparently, he's the first DUP minister to go to a GAA match, round one. Apparently, he was down south somewhere and spoke a few words in Irish, which and right now, what that proves or doesn't prove, like Jude, you can take it off, and leave it. I don't know.
Well, maybe. Well, let's hope for the best.
Yeah.
But I still think that they're taking an awful risk. They put in two people, him and the deputy leader. That'll depend on who they make. So is he going to make Given the first minister?
Well, that was the talk earlier on. Whether that comes to pass or not.
Does every time?
He's another. By the way, he's another creationist.
Is he? I didn't know that. Yeah. I knew he was a sort of a fundamental.
No, Bradley apparently belongs to the. She believes in gay rights. Is allegedly very liberal, and like I know nothing about her.
Who believes in gay rights?
Paula Bradley, who's the deputy leader.
Yes.
Apparently, see, they're saying this mightn't. There's, I think it was Sammy, right? I was reading. He says it's actually much more nuanced than what first appears. That in fact, it's a very clever strategy. It's sort of yin and yang. I don't know.
All things to all men. Time will tell. Time will tell. I personally think the optics of the thing are very important, and the optics are very bad as far as the DP is concerned.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's up to them. It's their party. Who are we, Pat, to be telling them what way to vote for their leader?
That's their
spokesman. Even though they insisted on who should be allowed to speak for the Garvahe Road residents a long time ago. Anyway, let's move on to another even worse topic, and that is the daily slaughter that's happening in Gaza. I don't know about you, but my heart sort of drops. I look at these buildings and I see guys bringing out children, and I just feel sick to my stomach.
Jude, that's why I presume the Israelis hit the building with the press the last day. You know, when you get rid of CNN and Al Jazeera and anybody else and Reuters and so on, and they turn around and this building was housing intelligence from Hamas. Bollocks, absolute bollocks. You know, it's all about the images of dead children are destroying the whole thing about Israel. The other thing as well, they've come out with all sorts of stuff, and I think so many people the IDF have told so many lies. No one believes a word of that. One of the things, Jude, I heard the last day was they were saying Iran is supplying Hamas with all these weaponries and so on. There's a guy on this morning, I should have thought of myself. It was a far better answer than anything I ever come up with. He says, that is absolute rubbish. He was one of these experts. He says, Israel totally controls what comes in and out of Gaza. He says there is no way, even if they wanted to, that Iran could supply Hamas with the rockets that are. He says they're made from cheap materials. That's why they fall short and all the rest. But if you listen to the American, Hamas is behind this and all this sort of stuff. And basically, Jude, right, three things. The Israelis a couple of weeks ago, they started expansion of illegal settlements. They then started knocking down Arab and Palestinian homes illegally on their way and actually taking over illegally homes. And then in East Jerusalem, the police went in totally heavily-handed, including going into a mosque and using stun grenades and other heavy-duty sort of alternatives, so that the president of Israel could have a conversation somewhere near the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And then when the Palestinians reacted to that, they're all heavy. Then he threw a few rockets, and then you factor in Netanyahu. The election's coming up shortly, so you sort of go, how cynical is all this? But Jude, I'm finishing up now. But see your point. See children coming out, and there's something seriously sickening as a human being to see buildings which human beings are in being knocked down, and there's 2 million people living in Gaza and a place the size of County Louth. And now, what's the population of County Louth? Maybe 150,000. And no water, no sewage, no proper working electricity. And they have no iron dome, they have no shelters. And Israel says they're the victim.
Well, I would just briefly say this thing about, I do feel sick to my stomach when I see these kids being brought in these buildings or their corpses. But
Yeah.
in fact, I mean, if you think of the Second World War, the idea
Yeah.
was on the part of the Germans and of the British, bomb British cities, bomb German cities.
Yeah.
And I mean, those were just equally innocent people, but nobody minds somehow. That's different.
Yeah.
But let me get on to making a case for Israel.
Yeah.
It's not actually something I would support myself, but if you have to try to think yourself into the circumstances that the Israelis find themselves in. First of all, the world, I think, the Western world carries a huge weight of guilt over what happened to the Jews in the Holocaust. 6
Yep.
million of them. You know, that was allowed to happen, or it did happen in supposedly
Industrial killing of human beings.
I mean,
Yeah.
it just was such a massive scale. Very hard to come back with anything more
Yeah,
horrible than
absolutely.
that. You know, everybody. So that's one thing. The Jews, as a result, have been tested in fire, if you like,
Yep.
through that terribly traumatic experience. We think
Yeah.
we're bad with Gorta Moore. We're not in the
Yeah.
same league in terms
Not
of
at
the
all.
Jews.
No, definitely
So
not.
their resolve is never again is this going to happen.
Yeah.
Never
Yeah.
again. And we
Yeah.
went meekly to the gas chambers last time. We ain't going
We will
again.
never do that
No.
again. And rightly
They-
so, by the way.
They look at themselves and they say they're surrounded by enemies.
Yeah.
They don't have any allies really in all that in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And it was Obama who said, I thought it was somebody else, but I checked the quote, and it was Obama who said, they bring a knife to the fight, we bring a gun.
Yeah.
I don't know if Obama meant it,
Yeah.
in joking fashion or not. But anyway, the lesson of that is mess with us and you'll be sorry. Now, that's what the Israelis really, that's the way they have conducted their
Yeah.
foreign policy, as it were, local
Yeah.
foreign policy. They don't talk softly, they talk loudly, but they
Yeah.
certainly carry a big stick and they use it at every opportunity. And in a way, if you were Jews in a sea or an ocean of people who were against you, if you had their history, their terrible, terrible traumatic history,
Yeah.
you might feel that there's a need to be very hardline and show that you're no wilting daisy. You'd be driven almost to do that at every possible occasion. So you bring a knife, we'll bring in a gun. And that's what they do whenever the Palestinians, fire rockets. Now, just one last thing. See this dispossession of the Palestinians.
Yeah.
You know how their lands are taken and the Israel is building on them, and they keep on doing it. It's just awful, really. They just throw them off it.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Look at history. Same thing happened in New Zealand, the Maoris, in Australia with the Aborigines, in Africa with the South Africa until they eventually had the revolution, in Ireland over the centuries, and in America. In most cases, the suppression and dispossession of the native people was successful. So successful, there's no question of anybody ever turning it back. So the fact is, America was built on the bones and the corpses of the native people. Forget it. That's the way it's going to be. That's how it was.
Yeah.
That's how it will be. Same thing applies in Australia. Same thing applies in New Zealand. Same thing applies in Africa. Well, it's not applied in Africa. Africa has come back. But I mean, those guys went in there, and for a couple of 100 years, maybe, they ruled the roost. And Ireland, it's been, it's a different situation. But that was the original idea. Strip the local people of any identity, take their land, make them go to hell, to Connacht or wherever. So it's not a new thing. And you might say, in addition to that, that the Jews or the Israelis are simply making sure that they're safe after 6 million of them having been fried in the ovens. So never again is their motto. And it's easy enough to see how if you were in their shoes, maybe you'd feel the same.
Yeah. There's a lot of truth in that, but Jude, I'm not sure it's like with and what was 1948, the Palestinians were actually sort of JCB'd off their land to make way for this group of people coming in. It wasn't sort of an infusion, along the way, but by bit by bit. It was just 750,000 Palestinians just cleared overnight by, and a sort of it's called the Nakba, Nakba, what is it, the catastrophe, and so on. And since then, there were supposed to be all these things about fair play to the Palestinians and so on. And if you look at any map, 1948, there was this wee bit was Israel, the rest was Palestine. Now it's other wee bit. This wee bit's Palestine, the rest is Israel. They've taken over and other. Jude, look, here's the thing. There are only one people getting dispossessed. It's not the Israelis. There's only one occupying army. It's not the Palestinians. If you check, there's only one community getting subjugated and oppressed and sort of racist and discriminated. Dude, there's a, what do you call it? Administrative detention. I think there's at one stage there was about 400,000 Palestinians held in various prisons and all the rest of it, right across Israel. They have, in other words, it's like detention without trial. And
it sounds familiar.
It sounds familiar. And then they turn around and then they say they're the victims. The Palestinians aren't doing anything to the Israelis. Basically, all they're doing is fighting back. Mm-hmm. And there's total, that's an apartheid state. And as I think in Gaza, if you're the European or Jewish, you go through one gate. And if you're Arab or Palestinian, you go through another, to get into the city. Like that's racism, no matter, or that's apartheid, no matter what way you come at it.
Yeah. Well, I quite agree with you, and certainly I would be on the side of the Palestinians, and I think they're treated vilely. But I was just giving you the kind of background that
absolutely, yeah, and I think, but can I turn it back on you? And I want your own opinion on this. Surely the people who have gone through exactly what you have just described very eloquently should be much better at you understand the concept of what they're doing now as morally, totally, completely, and utterly wrong.
But have you noticed, Pat, that say at the time of Brexit, or if you go to a Tory conference, very often one of the spokesmen or one of the most ardent Brexiteers is somebody with a brown or a black face.
Yeah.
It very often happens that people want to sort of they want to make themselves one of the natives, so to speak. Because they're so obviously not. And the same thing applies with people social. You get guys, for example, who are self-made men, right?
Yeah.
Who came out of poverty. And they look back at people and they don't say, God, I understand what those people are going through. I'll, maybe give them a helping hand. They say, I was able to pull myself up. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, lazy so-and-so. Very often people don't learn from their experience. What they do is they take their experience and twist it around the wrong way.
But so I remember the old one that I remember from childhood was the people who used to convert to Catholicism, and I remember somebody said there's no one has got the zealotry or the zeal of the convert. That they become more Catholic than the Catholics themselves. Right. Suddenly they're going to mass every day and Holy Communion and all that sort of stuff. So there's an element of truth in that. I think that's to prove that they have actually become, more Irish than the Irish themselves, to use that famous old expression.
I don't think that what the Israelis is doing is right in any way at all. Yeah. All I'm doing is saying, if 6 million of your people were killed the way they were killed, that's got to traumatize you. It's got to make you think a certain way. And the message is, of course, that violence pays.
Yeah.
If you're strong enough, you can do what you want. So that's been their thinking.
Well, Netanyahu, who's on record, is actually saying it. He says the strongest survive, and he says that's the harsh lesson. Palestinians.
Why, Pat, though, is the Jewish lobby in the US so strong? Like Biden's afraid to say a bloody word, other than that Israel's a victim, and
Jude, not a single senior American politician, Republican or Democrat, has said one word against Israel. No, Jude, and it's, by the way, it's a seriously divisive subject. Yet there's unanimity, and it's the Jewish lobby, AIPAC.
Why are they so powerful?
They have said in the past that because they've got serious money, apps, and they own a lot of the media, and they own a lot of filmmakers and Hollywood. They have big influence there. I remember clearly. I can't remember the name of the guy, but he won the best supporting actor about 10 years ago, and he criticized Israel. And apparently, one of the studio guys says, "I'll ensure he never works again." And sure, look at Mel Gibson's career. The minute he made anti-Jewish remarks, his career fell off a cliff. There's influence.
So are you saying, Pat, that the old idea of kind of a Jews as money men and money people, and kind of a conspiracy in a way. Are you
No,
saying
no.
that?
What I'm saying, APAC have made it very clear. APAC is really, American is really, they have said very clearly in the past that anyone who speaks out against Israel, they will, a politician, they will fund a campaign and fund it very well of anybody who goes up against an opponent. Plus the fact that the APAC, the Jewish lobby makes serious donations to a lot of politicians to help with their careers. And I don't think they can afford to turn that away. What else do they say? In America, the best politician you can buy. Every politician in America is basically bought.
There's something. I mean, if that's right, there's something basically wrong with the morals of American politics.
Well, Paul Ryan, who was the speaker, Jude, once he went in, someone was worth 200,000. When he went in, when he left, he was worth something like 10, 12 million. So what do you call the guy who's the majority, Mitch McConnell. Oh. Mitch McConnell is your salary is something like 400,000, and apparently he is now worth something like 36 million. How did you earn that during a political career?
Is Mitch McConnell a Jew?
I haven't a clue.
Well, what's the point then? I mean, he made a lot of.
No, I'm saying they're funding. Like, right. If you're only getting 400,000 a year, how do you amass 36 million?
Well, he's got friends in court. Well, there's a call I saw finally on this topic. There's a call I saw by some group in the South saying that if Irish politicians had any self-respect of the government and any self-respect, they would expel the Israeli ambassador.
Yeah.
Do you think they're right?
Yep. I think they should. Genuinely think they should. It was Jude. Do we have any morals anymore about anything? Like people laugh at Corbyn. They laughed at Jimmy Carter, and look what we've got. We got Trump, and we got Boris Johnson in control.
What about the consequences of evicting the Israeli ambassador?
Our ambassador would be chucked out of Israel right away. There's no
but a bit further than that. If what you say is true, if American politicians are really at the behest of the Jewish lobby, then you may be sure they wouldn't be too pleased with Ireland, and they would make that felt through their politicians.
Yeah, but there would be a whole sorts of incidents. Of course, there'd be all sorts of. But Jude, somewhere along the line, we just keep on sort of saying, "Hey, let the Israelis bomb the hell out of Gaza, kill what I don't know how many people, really keep them living in abject poverty." But hey, might is right, and God bless you, and we'll look after you. Like somewhere, somebody, if we believe in even the concept of what Jesus stood for, there has to be some
very few people believe that, Pat. Get real.
I know, exactly, and that's and I even when I say it, I know I'm sounding naive, but the reality is, somewhere I think people have to sort of say where the road we're heading is absolutely, pretty disgusting.
Well, I imagine that you haven't been to the Middle East as I haven't, but I remember talking to a guy that had been, and he said, "You know something, the Brits went easy on us." He was in West Belfast. The Brits were really, really easy on us.
Yeah, well, can you imagine if the Brits had to start bombing Dup'S flats or the
that was the grounds they said it wasn't a war. That if it was a war, they would have bombed Dublin. So, what was that? That was another news item recently, wasn't it? Something about what was that about a war? Do you see that? Is there somebody out there that you're?
There's a wee 5-year-old wee girl at my window. Go out there, yes, go on the door. Excuse me, wee 5-year-old, and I'm trying to sort of gone down to my wife.
Is she a relative of yours?
No, she's a neighbour up the road.
All right, yeah. No, there was something I saw recently about whether it was a war that had been going on. Oh yes, I think that was it. That the Republicans, IRA, that they had insisted throughout that the Troubles were a war, and if it was a war, then you should have sort of forgiveness and what's the term? Everybody should be pardoned their sins, so to speak, on all sides, including the British Army, and that that's the way it is in wars. So on the one hand, they're saying Republicans, claim that it was a war. On the other hand, they won't take the consequences of that, which is to say everybody's crimes, so to speak, in the war should be forgotten, including the British Army.
Yeah, but Jude, I don't think I see what's happening in Gaza. Like it's so disproportionate, so asymmetrical. You know, they have no Iron Dome, they have no shelters to go to. They're like sitting targets, and they're just getting bombed. There's it's amoral. It's basically genocide. It's you were talking earlier about the Germans and the Brits. Like, Jude, that was it might be sort of naive to say it again, but that was sort of half a fair fight because both sides, had armies in the field. These are people totally unarmed getting bombed to bits. Sure, even watching TV, there's buildings falling down around, and they're pulling 40 and 50 people out. There's one child, an 8-month-old child, and the entire family's gone.
Mm-hmm. But maybe that's what wars are like.
Oh yeah, I'm not disputing that. But don't try and the Israelis are trying to spin that they're the good guys and that they're the victims. And the Americans are backing them up. That's my argument.
Mm-hmm.
They are not the good guys.
I remember reading somebody and they said everybody, even the worst people, think that they're right. They really believe they're right.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying. The reason I said that stuff about the Israelis is they probably believe they're right. They probably believe they're right.
Yeah, and to some extent, by the way, if anybody thinks Hamas are lovely people, they're not. And some of the things they've done to their own people have been far from good. But that's sort of a cheap smear by the Israelis to sort of say, look what we're dealing with here. Hamas are a terrorist organization. And so on, and so that justifies whatever we do. That's absolute bullshit.
I'm just thinking of a situation. It didn't work here, mind you, but the philosophy on which loyalist death squads operated was that if you put the fear of God into ordinary Catholics, if you killed enough of them, in other words, that would dry up the sympathy for the IRA and game would be over. Maybe that's what the Israelis are trying to do as well. They're saying we'll kill so many helpless Palestinian civilians that they'll, as a group, just simply say to Hamas, "Don't ever fire another rocket." Is that the thinking?
Yeah, that's the thinking. Of course it is.
It might work.
Okay, but let's drop the hypocrisy that the Israelis are the victim. They are most certainly the aggressors. They are the most certainly what they're doing is basically not too far off genocide. It's totally amoral and immoral. And stop trying to pretend that we are the victim community. That's my argument.
Maybe the people who are most at fault are the Americans. If what you say is true, if they're bending to a lobby of people with money and are then sending all sorts of weaponry to Israel so they can do the kind of stuff they're doing, then they're the people who really should.
The figures open to correction, but I think the Americans are supplying $10 billion a year to Israel as well.
God's sake. And I mean, most people, nobody for a moment thinks that Israel doesn't have nuclear weapons, which is terrifying. Really.
There was a guy called Vanunu. He disclosed that, and he was tricked by a sort of female spy to go to somewhere, I think maybe Italy or someone. He was bundled into the back of the car and taken back to Israel, where he spent, I think, about 20 years in jail for disclosing their secrets.
Oh, dear, Pat. This is all very grim stuff. Have you any other items you'd like to throw?
Jude, here's a question for you.
Right.
Have you ever gone onto a nude beach?
I have.
And?
Your point? Well, I'll tell you something. I'll tell you what struck me about it. Well, it was a beach on which nudism was permitted. To be honest, I wasn't really on that part. I was sort of near to that part. I could see that if I kept on walking up the beach, I'd be in nude land. But I'll tell you something. Remember the time, I don't know, there was a period of time when topless swimsuits were all the rage on the continent. Yeah. And I remember any beach you'd have gone to in France in the 80s, I think it was, in the 90s, there were topless women went around with topless bathing suits. And at first, certainly, I used to wonder about my teenage son, and then I began to wonder about myself. But in a very short time, and this is God's truth, I began to appreciate how interesting and how complex the human face is compared to other parts of the anatomy.
Yeah. I know there's a story, and the guy's gone now, but there's a fellow journalist years ago. Myself and my dear wife Rosie went out with him and his wife one night, and he told the story of, and I'm not going to get into all it, it'll take too long. But anyway, they were on this beach, and he didn't realize he went out early in the morning, and they set up, and then people come along, and he says, stripping down. Anyway, one got up, and they had a sort of an umbrella, and he says, to this day, he wishes he had a camera, because this German guy, without a dolly on him, went up to help his wife fix up the umbrella. And he says, it was beyond anything. Anyway, we were on the beach in Spain, and very summer, there was this guy coming towards us with, put it like this, wedding tackle on display. And he was a young fella. And I said, Rosie says, God thinks they're looking up. and then, hey, the next one came along, was about a 90-year-old woman. And I said, typical. I said, my luck, hey, so we sort of left, but I remember that morning thinking, there was no going to, it was just the whole idea. No, the reason went in my head is that how much cultural difference does these sort of things make? Like we were I remember in an apartment block in Spain some years ago, and this German woman came up, and she took off all her shirt. It was the first time in my life I felt like running up and say, "Hey, Mrs. Go on, put on your clothes."
Well, actually, that's the thing. The human body. You see, we're used to seeing nudity in movies, and in movies, nudity is glamorized 99 times out of 100. Whereas nudity in the real world, you're not looking at perfect specimens.
Not at all.
Very often you're looking at pretty grim. So maybe it's a way of teaching people about reality. Maybe we should stop romanticizing what the human body is like for the average person. That is.
Jude, if you go on a beach anywhere in Spain and there's topless people, and I'm certain 9 out of 10 are far from the perfect 10. And by the way, after a while, you don't even notice that's a fact.
Right. That's right. That's what I'm saying. You start thinking, oh God, I have to start looking at somebody's face for a change. Interesting. But hey, listen, have you ever had a swim with no clothes on?
No.
I have. I mean, my wife would tell me I'm imagining this, but my good friend in Canada that was from Dublin originally, we went up with our girlfriends, now wives, a long time ago when we were young in Wicklow and the Wicklow Hills, and there's various places where there's lochs or lakes, small lakes. Geez, we hadn't got, myself and Hugh hadn't got swimming gear with us, but we said it was such a beautiful day. We finally just stripped off and jumped in. I tell you something now. Maybe it was Wicklow, but I doubt it. There was a feeling of freedom. The only comparison I can make is this: imagine having a bath, right? Having a bath, wearing your swimming trunks.
Exactly. I can understand it. In fact, I knew a man down in Gudor many years ago. Every day, 365 days a year, he went in. I don't know how long. And he was, when I knew him, he was in his 60s. He looked easily 20 years younger. He was slim, and his skin was unbelievable. And his hair, and I presumed it was untouched. But I thought, and I said to him one day, he says, "Oh, Paddy," he says, "I go down every day down to Maharagan." And he says, "I swim," I think he says 15, 20 minutes. Now I could be wrong, but anyway, whatever the sea salt, the iodine,
but was he wearing
whatever it is, I'd certainly done something for him. What?
Was he wearing swim gear?
No, he said he would done without the encumbrances of clothes.
Very good. Yeah, but maybe he would have got just as much out of it if he'd gone in with some clothes on him.
No.
There's a place called the 40 Foot in Dublin.
Dublin.
Sandy Cove somewhere.
Sandy Cove, I think it is.
But I have a notion that that's no longer nudist.
No, it's mixed bathing now, and I think it used to be exclusively male. It's now open to both sexes, and I think there's now cover up. Yeah.
Oh, there is cover up, is there?
I think so.
I was going to say if there's if both male and female are nude, that may be an interesting.
No, I think once a mixed bathing came in, it was in the interest of public propriety. Put on your clothes.
Public peace. No riots. Anyway, there's a lot to. Anyway, have I got this book here? Yeah. Anybody who is interested in nude bathing, and I've showed you this before, This is a book you all need to read.
Ah, yes,
Tyson, The Body, a guide
yeah.
for occupants.
occupants.
Tell you so much about your body that you didn't know, like how
Yeah.
many miles of intestine you have,
Yeah.
all sorts of industries, right down to viruses, for example. Viruses that come in.
I have a book of his up there. I think it's called Something About Everything or something. I can't remember.
That's right. I think you wrote something
Yeah.
like that. So there's the answer. So I don't want you to be having any sinful pleasure in thinking about your own body between now and I see you again. Okay.
If there's no pleasure in it, it's not a sin. Good luck, Jude.
Good luck, Pat. Thanks very much.